So moving on to the second part of our program, another speaker will be spending his precious time with us. Okay, now we will be witnessing another brilliant speaker, and he is none other than Mr. Muhammad Suhibuddin. Mr. Suhibuddin is a lecturer at the Faculty of Human Ecology of Bogor Agricultural University. His research and practical concerns are mainly focused on issues around land and forest tenure reform. He is engaged in some policy advocacy and social, including religious based. That's why he is invited in our event in the framework of achieving environmental and agrarian justice in Indonesia. In recent years, based on historical precedents, empirical evidence, and his own practical engagement, he promotes WAQF as an Islamic norm and institution to address agrarian and ecological problems in the country. So, ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome our second speaker for tonight, Mr. Muhammad Suhibuddin. A round of applause, please.
Thank you for your kind introduction. Nice to meet you all. Okay, I will share my presentation. It's about religious charitable endowments, or we term it in Islamic term as waqf, to address ecological and agrarian crisis. And I will bring some initiative from Indonesia to highlight how religious institution can be developed to address some environment and agrarian problem in Indonesia. Actually, talking about Islamic perspective toward the environment and natural resources will necessarily require a long discussion. This is because many aspects should be brought into consideration if we want to understand this issue comprehensively. However, the purpose of my talk will highlight only one aspect, namely Islamic institution, for the conservation and management of natural resources. And especially, I will focus only on one institution called Waqf, or Religious Charitable Endowment. By focusing on this specific institution, or Waqf, I hope I can show you some stories from creation, to use the title of this project, based on some experiences in Indonesia. I will share with you some cases in which Waqf are founded, established to address some ecological and agrarian problems taking place in the country. Now, as I already mentioned, many aspects will be covered when we talk about Islamic perspective toward the universe and natural resources. So we can talk about four broad topics. This is the first topic is about the Islamic principle regarding attitude toward the universe, natural resources, and the relation between human and nature. If I'm not mistaken, this is the topic that the previous speaker talked about from Christian perspective. And the second topic, if we discuss about Islamic perspective, concerned with the protection and conservation of the basic components of natural resources. And it will deal with water, land, and soil, air, and surely about plants and animals. The third topic is about protection from the harmful impacts of products and processes generated by human activities. We know about pesticides, for instance, or radioactive substances, or natural catastrophes, including those related to climate crisis, for instance. And the fourth topic is about principle and policies which govern the protection and conservation of the environment. So it's related to the governance principles. And the principle can be the mandate of the individual. Every Muslim has to consider this principle. Or maybe it can be the mandate of the governing authorities like the state, the government, for instance. And also there are some principles in Islamic perspective that govern public policy regarding the environment and natural resource management. And the latest topic is about Islamic institutions for the conservation and sustainable management of natural resources. For instance, there is institution which regulate reclamation of revival of land. There is institution to allocate some areas as natural reserve, and also sanctuaries, and also inviolable zones or al-harim. For instance, river basin is considered al-harim. Coastal areas is considered al-harim. So it is prohibited to own the zone al-harim individually, because this is considered the common area, and it is also protected. And the latest institution that I will talk about is Charitable Endowments or Waqf. Before going to the details, let's start with the discussion about the notion of Waqf and its component. As you see here, Waqf means a charitable and religious trust. So actually it constitutes the major avenue for private contribution to the public good for the commons. And the foundation of Waqf will require some elements. The first is the founder. The founder can be individuals or social or legal entities like Islamic organizations or companies, for instance. And also properties being donated. The properties can be movable or immovable. Movable like cash, for instance, or car, and immovable like land, building. And the dedication of Waqf or Waqf deed. For instance, what is the purpose of the Waqf? The period of donation. The donation state as for a period of time or forever, for instance. And the beneficiaries. The beneficiaries can be members of family, can be certain groups, or can be for public without any limitation. And the last is the trustee or mutawali who manage the Waqf and develop it according to its purpose. And the Waqf may take the form of land trust, for instance, agricultural and pastoral use, land use for conservation, for garden, etc. And also it may take the form of a fund or endowment for the financing of such charitable projects. So, for instance, using crowdfunding mechanism, for instance, through internet, we can collect public fund and use it to establish Waqf, for instance. And then several aspects can be determined during the dedication of Waqf, as I mentioned before. What is the purpose of Waqf, and then what is the specific use of land? And this is very important because in many areas, the land is donated as Waqf with special limitation that land used for forest, for instance, or land used for food production, for instance. And then during the dedication of Waqf, the founder can define what benefit to be provided through the Waqf. And then founder also can define who are the beneficiaries. For instance, the beneficiaries can be confined among family members. It's called Waqf ahli or Waqf for the family. It can be allocated to specific groups, or for public. And in Indonesia, Waqf is well recognized because we have a specific law regulating Waqf, law number 41, 2004. In this law, Article 1 states that Waqf is legal act of the Waqif to spirit and or provide part of his properties to be used in perpetuity or forever, or for a certain period of time, for instance, for 5 years or 10 years. After that, the properties will be returned to the Waqif. According to his or her wills, for the purpose of Islamic worship and or for general welfare in accordance with the Sharia. So here we understand that Waqf can be stayed for a limited time and also for forever. And also the purpose is varied. I will explain later. But what I want to emphasize that the beneficiaries not only limited to the Muslims. The beneficiaries of Waqf can include all people from all religious background. Except for Waqf, whose purpose is dedicated for Islamic worship, for instance, donated for mosque. In this case, the beneficiaries will be limited to the Muslim. But if Waqf donated, for instance, for establishing forest Waqf, or plantation Waqf, then it can cover beneficiaries from different religious background. The purpose and significance of Waqf, we can see here, Article 22 in Waqf law in Indonesia. The purpose of Waqf can be dedicated for several purposes. The first is for Islamic ritual services and facilities. In this case, the beneficiaries confined to Muslim. But for other purpose, it can cover all people from different religious background. So the second purpose can be education and health services and facilities. The third, to support the poor, neglected child, orphan, as well as scholarship. The fourth is to improve and advance the economy of Ummah. Although this is the reference to Ummah, actually it can cover also non-Muslim. And this is stated in the last purpose, public welfare. All activities that related to public welfare can also become the purpose of Waqf, as long as it not violates Sharia and law. So we see here how inclusive is the purpose of Waqf. And then if we consider this purpose, actually Waqf has many significance. The first is that Waqf can establish public good, and in some case it will form the commons, pastoral land or forest Waqf, it's become the common. And also through the Waqf, the founder can define specific land use, for instance, the land donated for food production, or for forest, or for plantation. And then the founder also can define what kind of access and benefit that people can get from the Waqf. For instance, right to use the land, for instance, not to own because this is Waqf, but right to use land, to use agricultural land, for instance. Or in broader term, the benefit can be environmental services if the Waqf in the form of forest Waqf. And also, by using Waqf, it can counter various mechanisms of exclusion and fragmentation. I will explain this later. And also can counter forces of land and forest conversion, because we know in Indonesia the number of land and forest conversion is still high, and by using Waqf it is actually can counter this process. And also by using Waqf we can combine different kind of Waqf. For instance, we can also collect funds, we can mobilize movable goods to finance forest Waqf, for instance, or to finance plantation Waqf, or to finance paddy field Waqf, for instance. So by combining land and other kind of Waqf, actually we can solve also the problem of financialization. Now let's go to the historical precedents where we need to consider Waqf as a feasible scheme to address environmental and agrarian crisis. I quote two references here. The first is from Abbasi. He stated that Waqf is very enormous in Muslim societies, and the reason for this enormous proliferation of Waqf is said to be the protection of property right in Muslim societies. And he mentioned two historical processes. Firstly, the state was the legal owner of most of the land, and the farmer only can use it, so the state can easily take back the land. And then secondly, it is a common practice in the past where the state can confiscate land from the people, and they take the land and then give it to strengthen his power. So by using Waqf, then farmer can protect their land, because if land donated as Waqf, then it's basically belongs to the God, and nobody can sell it, can take over it, and etc. And this significance continues until the colonial period. So, for instance, in Algeria, the colons, French settlers, try to get land but they repeatedly frustrated because most land in Algeria has been designated as Waqf. So here we see the significance of Waqf as mechanism to protect land, to counter the exclusion. And another aspect, Waqf can also be used to provide access to family members, especially to women. Because if we talk about inheritance system Islam, the division of property is unequal between a daughter and son. Son can get twofold. And by using Waqf instead of inheritance system, Waqf can be also a scheme to provide access, especially to women. So we see here, if we consider historical precedent, Waqf become part of the struggle against exclusion here, and also become part of the struggle to give access, especially to women. Now we turn to Indonesian situation, and before I share some Waqf initiative from different parts of the country, I will give you some illustration about the challenge in Indonesia, environmental challenge and also agrarian challenge. For instance, if we see here, the deforestation is still high, although the tendency is decreasing from time to time, but the number is still high. For instance, here we see 0.48 million hectares deforested between 2016 to 2017, and mostly in state forests. So this is still a big challenge in Indonesia. Here we see the challenge of large-scale land acquisition, and especially it's related to oil palm expansion in many parts in Indonesia. Many forests, many agricultural land converted into oil palm plantation, and especially it happened during decentralization era, because now Indonesia use local autonomy in managing the country, and the district government has more authority to allocate land and to give to the investors. So it happened that many areas converted into oil palm, and the impact is very massive here, because it's not only about the conversion of land use, but also it includes as well grabbing land from local community. This is just to illustrate in one district in central Kalimantan, Seruyan district. The area of oil palm cover perhaps half of the district area, and also it encroaches the national park. So you can imagine the situation. And due to this process, we can see here that the number of villages was landscape mainly characterized by paddy field. This is village with most areas used as paddy field to produce food to feed the country, is significantly decreasing from 2003 to 2011. It is the period when the oil palm expand throughout the country. So we see here the challenge of the agrarianization. The landscape in the village changed drastically. And also in Java, the conversion of paddy field is very fast. The total number of paddy field conversion is more than 1,000 hectares per year. So you can just imagine if all paddy field area become oil palm plantation, become settlement, become infrastructure, the food security in Indonesia will be damaged. And part of the story is the challenge of depersonalization, because the conversion of land into large-scale oil palm plantation owned by the companies, because paddy field conversion, the number of patients is significantly decreasing from 2003 till 2013, more than 5 million families. And it is become problematic because when they depart from the agricultural sector, they could not find their place in industrial sector, because the industry could not absorb all of them. So this has become the problem. So this is just to illustrate to you about the challenge of environmental and agrarian crisis in Indonesia. And given this background, I find that in some communities, they use waqf and develop waqf to address this kind of problem. So I wrote a book in 2019, and the book discussed 4 cases of waqf in 2 districts in East Java province, 1 in Banten province, and the last in Aceh province. So they develop differently. For instance, in these 2 districts, the land was donated as waqf, and the founder stated that the land should be maintained as paddy field to produce food. But interestingly, in this district, the beneficiaries are confined to family members. In Jombang, it combined family members and for public purposes. In Pandeglang, the waqf established as plantation, and the benefit will be distributed to surrounding people. And in Aceh Besar, the waqf was developed to be forest. Yeah? So this is the case of forest waqf. This is just to illustrate some case of forest waqf. This is a waqf in Bogor, in my hometown, in West Java. So this is the illustration how green the area. So the initiator mobilized fund from different sources and then buy the forested land and then planted trees, and it reforested again. Yeah. This is the case in Aceh, in the upstream Krung River. So they use crowdfunding through different channel, Facebook, social media, through internet, yeah. And then they buy land in different parts of the upstream area, and then they establish waqf. Yeah. So, this is the case in Aceh, and this is the case in East Java. This is waqf for paddy field, as I mentioned before, and I'm sorry, so this is in Bahasa, but this is detail about the waqf, yeah? Who is the founder, what kind of waqf, what kind of the purpose, what is the land use, for instance, what is the benefits, who are the beneficiaries, yeah, something like that. So it's to explain more detail about the case of waqf for paddy field in East Java. And this is the case of estate waqf, plantation waqf in Banten. So you see here they use crowdfunding through internet to mobilize fund from the people. This number represents the situation in 2019 when I wrote the book, and this is the scheme. Yeah, so they mobilize fund from the people and manage in rumah waqf. This is the initiator, the trustee. And then they involve people to provide land as waqf, some with buying the land. And then they develop coconut in this area, and lada. What is lada in English? I forgot. And the profit from this plantation used as social fund to be allocated to surrounding communities, to economic empowerment, scholarship, yeah, something like that. So if we reflect these cases from different parts of Indonesia, you can see here they motivated by religious spirit, and then they use waqf as a scheme, and by waqf for sure they change the tenure regime from individual property rights to be the commons, because waqf belong to the God and the benefits goes to the people. And then actually they combine between ecological concern with economic solidarity. So this is what can we reflect from several cases. And by doing so, actually they shift the paradigm, the dominant paradigm where economic interests become the highest value, become the highest rank, and then society should be arranged according to the economy, as we see in capitalist system. And for sure, environment become merely resources, become objects to exploit it, to serve the economic interests of the society. But by using waqf, it is transformed into the new alternative paradigm where the environment or nature in general consider as a theophany, because land belong to the God. It's become, in Arabic it called ayat kauniyah, Sorry, I got difficulty to translate in English. Then society in the second order, society is not the owner of the environment. God owns the nature. Society should adjust their structure, their lifestyle, their political system according to nature. And then economy is only instrument, not as the highest value. So this is the spirit of Waqf, as I can understand from several cases in Indonesia. And also by learn from that case, actually we can develop some model. This is model, not empirical cases, but the model actually refer to the empirical one. So I'm sorry, still in Bahasa, I don't have time to translate. But Waqf can be a mechanism for counter-fragmentation, because as we know, the reason why farmers in Indonesia are very poor because their land holding is very small. And one of the reasons behind this is the fragmentation of land because the inheritance system. So if we use this process, of course, land will be fragmented from generation to generation. But if land not inherited, but it donated as Waqf for family members, so it can be maintained as it is, but the benefit can be distributed to the family members. And Waqf actually can be used to consolidate small piece of land owned by small farmers, to consolidate it into the bigger one, and can be used more productive using modern mechanics, for instance, through joint Waqf. So they jointly donated the land to one institution they established, a cooperative or but then the benefits goes back to them, to the former landowner, for instance. And many others, many others model can be developed actually. For instance, also to address a problem of post-disaster or to mitigate disaster, for instance, to consolidate land, and then use for disaster mitigation, for instance. I think that's all what I can share from Indonesia's experience. Thank you for your attention.